So far in this training, we've focused solely on the scheduling grid piece of the appointment center. But if your office also offers drop-in hours or has folks that work drop-in shifts, you're going to need to learn to use another piece of the appointment center. If you click this arrow or anywhere on this title, it turns into a drop-down list, and you'll want to click Drop-in Appointments. Once the page loads, as you can see, if there's anyone currently on the drop-in list, they'll show up for you. This first available queue is a list of students who are going to be able to be visible by anyone who is looking at the drop-in queue for that specific location and care unit that you have. In this instance, advising undergraduate studies in the care unit of general advising. So, as you can see, this student's been waiting quite a while. I put them in a little while ago for this training. If there are students that have been checked in for drop-in with a specific staff member, let's say they've met with a staff member previously, or you use a drop-in protocol where they check in with specific people, you'll see them checked in with staff. This last piece, the track time, is something that may not even show up in the live site for you and isn't something that most offices would be using. Some offices like athletics or some study hall or tutoring center resources might use that, but most offices that will not be a feature that you'll be using. So the first thing that you'll do if a student is being checked in for drop-in is enter their 9-5 number here. Now, it's important to know that within the SSC system, you're able to enter any student for drop-in. So you'll want to make sure that you're very familiar with the protocols for your specific office, unit, department, division around drop-in. It's up to you to decide whether or not a student that comes to you meets those requirements for being on drop-in in your office. So let's say you determine that a student does meet those protocols. So you can enter a 9-5 number, or in this instance, as always in the test site, type in a test student for us. So there is prospective student 1. So what you want to do is click either this add to staff queue or right here on the student add to staff queue. If you click here, it's not going to do anything different than up above. It's just a little more intuitive to click right here. So if you click down on this drop down, you do have to select either first available or a specific staff member. If you select first available, the student is going to go into that first queue that, again, anyone can see. This is probably what most offices that do drop-in would be using. If you, let's say, have a specific service that only one person on your staff offers on drop-in, like resume review or applications or counseling, and only one person is qualified or trained to do that, then you could choose a specific staff member. In this case, we're just going to pick this first available staff. The services that show up might be limited depending on how folks set up their availability. In this case, it looks like at this location and care unit, there's only 2 different services that folks have used in their availability. Having drop-in available, even this page available, is dependent on someone on your staff having drop-in availability listed for that day. So if no one on your staff had drop-in availability within SSC, you would come here and this drop-down menu would not be clickable. So if you see that it's not clickable, you can't check a student in, you'll want to be talking to whoever manages the staff or advising side of availability setting, because it means something hasn't been set up right on that side of things. Once you are selecting a service, you can show all services or additional services for this location. If you allow phone drop-ins or phone calls to be checked on a drop-in, we recommend that you select phone appointment for the service and then indicate within your comments what exactly the student is hoping to talk about. If the student is there for an in-person appointment, we recommend selecting the service at your location that best reflects what the student hopes to speak about. Your list may look very different from the list of services here in the test site, and that's going to be determined by the office in which you're working. So let's say that this student is not a phone appointment, so we don't need to use that reason or service. Let's say that they're here because they want to talk about we do petitions in our office, so they're going to do an SRC petition. So in this case, one of the ones that we might see on drop-in sometimes for students would be if they're trying to cancel a disqualification, let's say. So student is looking to cancel their disqualification. And then you can enter a callback number. We highly recommend this whenever possible, that you get a callback phone number. So in case the student steps out or it's a phone appointment, obviously you're going to need one of those for the advisor side of things, or just if there's follow-up questions or concerns. One thing to note is that 1, there's a limit of 250 characters in this specific comment box, and 2, more importantly, this comment box is the only comment box that isn't going to be sent along to a student, and in fact isn't saved currently long-term within SSC. That could change at some point in the future, but what that means is you're able to put a different level of detail than you might in those appointment comments that we talked about before, where they need to be very objective. So in this case, you still want to be objective and professional, but let's say the student comes to you and is crying or is clearly upset. You're going to be able to include information that's relevant around that. So if you need the advisor to know, student has a parent here with them, or student expressed anger at the situation that they are in, you're able to include that to give the advisor that information. And again, that's only in that drop-in queue where currently it doesn't show to students and is not saved. Once you're done making those decisions on how you want to check the student in, you click Add to Staff Queue. And you can see while they're pulled up at the top, it's going to show that they're in the queue. You can close out of that student so that you could pull up someone else. And you can also see that they show up down here. You can see the checked-in time for each student and how long they've been waiting. You might want to monitor this, especially during busy times for drop-in, to ensure that students are being served. So if there's a concern ever, if let's say you had a student who's been waiting in your lobby for 3 hours and 15 minutes, it's a very patient student, you might want to check in with someone in your office or your department to see if drop-in is happening, or if the drop-in person is out today, or something else needs to happen. If a student needs to be removed from the queue because they've decided they no longer wish to wait, or they decided that they don't want to be in drop-in, or let's say you accidentally got the wrong 95 number or something else, you simply click the radio button next to the name of the student you'd like to remove. Click the Actions drop-down menu and click Remove. This checkout button is mostly going to be used in tutoring centers where they're not going to be getting a report on the students, they're just being checked out. You can also move a student to the top. So let's say even though this student has only been waiting 0 minutes right now, or a minute at this point, it seems highly urgent, or it falls under the protocol in your office where this student needs to be a high priority, you're able to do that. So you could click Move to Top, and that student is going to jump ahead of the rest of the queue and come up as a priority. You'll want to make sure that you know if your office decides to use that as a service or a protocol and how it's supposed to be implemented. You'll also want to keep a look on these ones that are checked in with specific staff members as well. The way that you as a front desk staff member see these queues does look differently from the way that advisors or staff members might see these queues. And because of that, it's easier for you to track if someone who's checked in with staff has been waiting a good amount of time and hasn't been seen by that particular staff member. Staff members are trained on how to look at those queues, but it's important that you monitor them when you're able to as well. A staff member on their side of things would pick up a student using that same radio button, and instead of the actions that you have listed here, they're able to start an appointment with a student. And due to that, they can then create a report on advising, or they can remove the student based on whatever the protocols are for your office. When that happens, the student will remove from the queue from your side of things. In our office, when we have phone appointments like this instance here, often an advisor might pick the student up and then have to put them back on, because once the student is picked up, the callback number doesn't show up anymore, because like I said, those comments don't really save anywhere. So if you see a student quickly get picked up and then put back on, likely check to see if it's listed as a phone appointment, and it's probably because an advisor realized they need to get that phone number really quickly, and then they'll pick that student back up again. So this is a pretty simple area of the site to use. If you need to narrow down by specific staff, specific services, or if you handle multiple care units within your area, you're able to do that within this space. So it's pretty simple compared to, all the clicking that we did in that appointment center, but it is also something that it's very important to keep an eye on, especially in the first week of the term and during registration if you're a traditional advising office.